Hi, I'm Wyatt.
And I'm Grace.
And you're listening to our dad and your host of the Vacation Rental Revolution podcast.
What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Vacation Rental Revolution podcast. I'm your host, Sean Moore, and I am really excited for our Friday episodes. You guys know that every Friday we interview short-term rental investors that are, just regular, everyday people, different walks of life, willing to share their journey into the short-term rental game. Today, we've got Miss Terri Lynn Never joining us. And so, Terri, thanks so much for joining us. I'm excited to dive in and have a conversation about your guys' journey into short-term rentals.
Thanks. Welcome.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, Terri, I always like to start with the backstory, right? Just start the conversation about, where you're at, where you're from, what do you do for a living? What pays the bills? What is that active income we're trying to parlay into passive income? And then we'll lead into the short-term rental game from there. But tell us a little bit about your background and where you're from and what you do for a living.
Sure. I'm based in Toledo, Ohio, and both my husband and I are in industrial real estate. So we help site selection and incentives for large corporations that need to find their next site in the U.S. or actually North America. We are a London-based office. It's called Savills. It sounds like Saddles, but it's Savills. And so my husband's been in real estate for 40 years. I've been only in the real estate about 5. And before that, I was in engineering and construction. So I have that background, but it's always been the ugly industrial stuff that I've worked. And born and raised on a farm. I moved out to Lake Erie 26 years ago. I've owned several businesses. I had Curves for Women when the workout down in Waco was going crazy. So I had 3 of those. I've had 2 bar grills. I've had a cleaning business. So I've been always that entrepreneur type person on top of having a full-time job. So my background is I traded grain commodities out of college and then had these side businesses and then got into waste. We were public waste for a while and then into the engineering construction and then into real estate. So that's kind of my background. So I know how to run businesses and so forth, but having help from someone like Vodacy was a plus because we don't do homes. When we buy homes, we rely on a good broker and so forth. And those steps that you guys taught us was very helpful. So
it's interesting because, there's so many people that, I always tell everybody real estate is this big, wide world. And there's a lot of different asset classes. You guys are, very familiar with the commercial industrial stuff with these big corporations coming in and trying to figure out all the logistics of site selection and all the important things that go into selecting that site and being able to build totally different than what you're doing on the residential side with even just regular homes. But then you start talking about short-term rentals, way different, right? And it's a question that comes up a lot that people are like, well, I've got some real estate background. I'm pretty versed in real estate. I'm, this or that or the other. And I'm like, well, you're really not that versed if you don't recognize that these different asset classes are so different, right? And so it's interesting.
Very, very helpful. So the question would probably lead in, so why did we decide to get into short-term rental? It goes back to COVID. My daughter, I was widowed with her dad died before she was 2. So I decided to really start saving money. So when she went to college, she wouldn't have to have any debt and so forth. So I was very aggressive. She had over about $150,000 in an account that wasn't really doing that much. And I said, you're not going to go to college because at her junior year, she started classes at home. She kind of got to that homebody thing. And then she tried to go to college and it just did not work. And I never thought she'd be that way. I have never had to set an alarm for this kid since she was little. I mean, she gets up, she has her regimen. I can tell you exactly what she does every morning in her schedule and so forth. But it was kind of a little disappointing, but not, college isn't for everybody. And so I was Googling what's the difference between VRBO and what's Airbnb, and Vodacy comes up. I'm like, what's this? So I started looking at it and started saying, reading how it gives you the steps. You can join. We'll walk you through it. And I come out and I said, family meeting. And so we all sat down and told them a little bit about it. And they all kind of actually went on site and I said, Logan, we're going to spend your money. You're going to invest. So I want everybody to think about it and pick where you guys want to have vacations. I already knew she was going to pick Florida, and I knew my husband was going to pick out West. So we ended up saying, okay, since she's going to be involved, we would look at Florida investment. So we started, oh my gosh, went through, I don't know how many locations. We always vacation in Fort Myers and
Mhm.
Hollywood, both sides, but we know that Cape Coral, Fort Myers, very well. I've boated and everything down there. So we end up finding a place, great broker. And then the broker led us to a great property manager.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, so she actually wrote a check for $50,000, put her name on the house. Now we have our LLC and she's a part of that LLC. So,
Good for
um,
her. That's awesome. She 18, 19 now? How
we
old is she?
to be 21 next month.
Okay, 21. Yep, that's awesome. I mean, it's so what a fun journey into it, and a great story into kind of kind of leading the charge of saying, "Hey, we found this," but still, like you said, a kind of a family meeting, family decision. She's going to be involved, and as you build this portfolio, are you and your husband involved with her? Do you invest with her? Or is this her
Oh
asset
yeah.
that you're
Yeah.
just helping with?
Nope. We have our investments. We kind of have like a let's say a sum put together, and we can pull money out of that, and we pay interest back to pay that lump
Yeah,
off. Now, eventually, if we want to, we'll get a loan. If we pay it down, I like to get it paid off, but if we get
yeah,
it, so there will be some liability there, but it will just teach her. She doesn't have it really hard right now because she lives at home, but she realizes that when it comes to payments and so forth and insurance and so she's learned a lot. It was fun. We actually had sold a house over in Cleveland that was in Snowbelt, so we had a lot of extra stuff that we didn't need. And so we actually loaded up a U-Haul. We drove down. She flew down with a good friend of mine, and we for a whole week and a half we just the place was very in great condition. But I went and had the painters come in before we came down, so
yeah.
it was all freshly painted. And then we just went to town. We had a ball doing it, and in this world you lose these kids as they get older, but I thought it helped us get closer. And we actually flew down, just her and I, to pick out the house that we were going to choose from. So
Yeah.
we went through and said the pluses and minuses. We wanted a pool, and we had a lot of fun things that
Nice.
we
So
did.
she's very actively involved in it. I mean, this is,
Yes.
she's getting involved with the selection. How involved does she get with, like, is she understanding the numbers? Is she diving into the underwriting? I mean, it sounds like she's pretty active all the way around.
And it's probably a little bit is my fault because I've been just so slammed. We end up getting just a lot of successes on the industrial side of real estate. It's really busy right now, so I've been really involved. And she's actually taken her test June 14th for a real estate license.
All right.
So she's getting into real estate up in Michigan. We live right on Michigan-Ohio line, so
Right.
usually you take both. Michigan's a little easier than Ohio, so she went with Michigan. So yeah, she gets involved, and I think as we get, she helped me with the marketing on the Facebook. But I need to get her more engaged. But I think we're doing pretty good.
Yeah. Is she going to join kind of the family business on that industrial side with you guys, or is she going to dive into like the residential side on her own and navigate that road with her real estate?
Yeah, good questions. She's lived with me my whole life. Going into refineries and food and beverage. I worked with Nestle. Campbell Soup comes to town and we go out to dinner. Campbell Soup people have been to our house for dinner. I mean,
Yeah.
and they do all the construction for Campbell Soup. We're very heavy. There's a lot of factories, tomato factories here in town. So I've done a lot of work with them. So she's seen that. She thinks it's really cool, but she doesn't really have that background. But she's going to look at residential up in Michigan. And it's one of the best, they're most aggressive. They're friends of ours. Kids are running this, and they're just going crazy. I bet you they're closing a house or two every week.
Wow.
And the market's very strange up here because where we live on the water, there isn't a lot of houses because people are staying on the water. However, when you get up to Michigan, there's houses they're turning houses left and right.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe, so
Real estate is always super regional. I've always said that. Like, so many people quote national statistics and what's going on across the board and everything lumped together. And it's a really, really, you got to be really careful. You can be misled one way or the other really, really quickly with real estate if you're looking at national statistics because it's so regional. And You have to look at what growth is going on, the activity in an area, because literally, like you said, across the border could be totally different. There could be almost no sales because nobody's selling. There's no inventory. Another area, you've got enough inventory. There's people moving in. There's things going on, and then on the flip side, you might have somewhere where nobody's, people are moving out, because of rules, regulations, and taxes. And all of a sudden, I mean, we're seeing that in the Californias, the New Yorks, some of those areas that people are like, I'm kind of done with this. And so they're struggling a little bit. The real estate looks down. And so it's interesting you bring that up, because that applies to what we're doing in short-term rentals as well. Like because we are very regionally affected as well. I mean, you're down in an area, Cape Coral. It is, it's susceptible to the, storms and hurricanes or whatever else. And so you have to navigate some of those every year or, so, and sometimes you skirt by them. Sometimes you get hit, and that area and that region gets hit hard. You guys, Cape Coral, talk about the hurricane last year. It was kind of a near, not super devastating, but it could have been, and neighboring communities were really bad, right?
Oh yeah, I think it was 2 years ago when they got the worst brunt of one, and our house had very little. Had the roof line had a little damage, and by the way, it was not disclosed when when the broker that was selling did not disclose that there was damage on the peak.
Yeah.
And so thank God our broker had a very good inspector, and they caught it. In fact, they caught several items that knocked the price off over $25,000 less. And the broker should have got in trouble because he did not represent the home correctly. And it hurt the sellers because the sellers had to pay. But we went out to the Ozarks that was going to be our next stop. So we drove out to the Ozarks, just thought we'd take a nice drive out, my husband and I. And we got out there and I go, wow, I thought there was go fast boats in Lake Erie until I got there. And I'm like, wow, this is a party town. I don't know if I'd rather have family type.
Yeah. It's one of our like longtime members, Jeff and Jessica. They live on the Lake of the Ozarks, and he grew up there. And he shows me pictures of some of those boats, like racing helicopters. I mean, these boats are these crazy, like these race boats that are out there, and they do those races, and I'm like, whoa, that's not what I pictured at the Lake of the Ozarks either. Like I just kind of pictured, you go out and putz around with your pontoon and everybody hangs out family style. That's a party lake for the most part. And when he shows me pictures of that, I'm like, whoa, that's kind of crazy. So I've seen some of that. I've never been there personally, but he lives right on the lake and shows me pictures all the time.
Oh yeah, we had researched the best sunset, Lori. We have all the areas to go, and he helped us actually a little bit. We just decided that probably wasn't going to be our next. We like Yellowstone area. I have friends in Bozeman. I kind of like that. I love Utah.
Yeah.
So that will probably be our next once we get, as I said, we're building right now. And this home that we have live in right now is 5-bedroom. And it's a pontoon. We have a pontoon, but it's Lake Erie. You can go out putts in Lake Erie. And this will be our next short-term rental. And then we'll probably look at either Northern Michigan's beautiful or we'll go out west.
Yeah. Northern Michigan is beautiful, fairly close to you guys. Out west, we'd love to have you out here. It's I can't ever leave the Western Mountains. It's there's just something about it that I love, and it's always been home. So wherever home is, you kind of are comfortable with. That's your comfort zone, right? And so, so tell me a little bit about the process. This is it's interesting, and I want you to kind of speak to it because you guys are involved in real estate. You're involved in that commercial industrial space. A lot of things are very numbers based, and very like when you're selecting sites, way different than when you went in and said, hey, we're going to have a family meeting. Where do we want to own vacation homes? You've heard me talk about that, and I always tell people to start there. When people say, where are the best markets, right? And I always say, start with building a portfolio that you want to go visit. And a lot of times like really strict investors are like, I'm never going to use this. I'm never going to stay in this property. I'm never going to use it. And I say, still go through that process, because there's an element to short-term rentals that we have to deliver this amazing experience. And if you don't like the area and you don't understand who the target audience is, you're not going to do a good job of delivering that experience, which as an investor, that's what's going to pay you more than somebody else. And so I always tell people to start there. But it also, for me personally, when I got into short-term rentals, it's a long-term investment that has really short-term benefits on the lifestyle side. And it kept me interested long enough to where I started to really see the fruits of the labor, and really kind of the juice became worth the squeeze on that ownership model. Was that a struggle for you guys when you heard me say that and you said, hey, we're going to sit down, we're going to do this, but now let's talk about where we want to own? And, or do you realize it now, probably because you've been through the process, but at the time, was it a struggle, or you were like, hey, listen, we're going to follow the process regardless?
Well, the maximizer tool and all the tools you guys give us really were helpful. I mean, because we were looking at bottom line, the P&L, what we're going to be able to make. I kind of knew you really learned where you should be buying that range in to be able to make money. Florida is a little different. We know the area very well. Would we ever live down there? My husband and I will not, because we are more like the Michigan, Ohio weather. I
Yeah.
love snow and I don't like the heat, but we'd go down and visit. We were just down a couple of weeks ago because it wasn't booked. But it's a great market for like October to April, and then it kind of dies down, and you're kind of like trying to struggle a little bit
Right.
and filling this. So we put that in the numbers. We knew that it was going to be probably 2 to 3 years before we saw a profit, because we bought late. We did not book. We bought this property in last August. So by the time we got everything going and it all set up, we started marketing in October. And
Right.
everyone down there usually books ahead of time.
Yeah.
So right now we have 3 months booked, which is the main area. And now we just have to get our November, December, and our late spring book, which we usually will have. We have two turning people that haven't told us when they want to book yet. So
Yeah.
a lot of that, we're so thankful for the Odyssey, all the steps, making sure you look at the banking, look at the rates, look at a great broker, look at a great property manager is a huge plus. We have the best. We actually had lunch with them when we went down there. I talked to him, every other day. He's working on right now. We're having some sprinkler issues. And so he's working on all that, and he takes it off our hands. He says, that's what I'm here for. And so that is huge.
Yeah.
Very huge.
Yeah. A good property manager is worth their weight in gold. I truly believe it's by far and away the most important relationship we have as investors is with our property manager, and selecting the right one, because the wrong one can really be a headache. And the right one, you're like how you're speaking about your property manager. You're like, man, they are awesome. They make it so easy for us. It becomes a turnkey property. When there's a problem, they deal with it. And a lot of times, like with my property managers, I don't actually hear about problems until we do a catch up, and they're like, yeah, this, and this happened, but we took care of it. And like, I hear about it after it's over. Right. I don't, and it's just when we're catching up, or I'm getting getting an update on things, but I don't even hardly ever hear about problems while they happen. And, which is awesome, and that's, and you mentioned something else as well through the process on the underwriting. You said, we know that it's going to be kind of from October to April, we're going to make our money, right? And then from, that summertime it's hit or miss, right? Because it's hot and not a lot of people are going down there. And so, but like you said, but we planned on that, right? We underwrote that. We knew that going in, and that can still be a really good investment, even though that's the case. And I tell people that all the time. There's a property, one of my most profitable properties I ever had was up by Yellowstone. It's 10 minutes from the gates of Yellowstone in Idaho. Actually, it was right by West Yellowstone, and right on the border up there of Idaho and Montana. And it was on a lake called Henry's Lake. And we were really Memorial Day to Labor Day. That's it. Right. And but we were almost 100% booked during that time. It was really high. It was a really high nightly rate during that time. And then it was shut down the rest of the year. I mean, I wasn't even getting 6 months worth of revenue. I was averaging about a 30% occupancy, and it was still a really profitable property because we planned on it, we underwrote it, we knew exactly what we were going into, and it worked out really well. Similar to what a Cape Coral house is going to be like, right? Where you're getting those people coming down. Is your property, is it a nightly rental, weekly rental, monthly rental? Because I know down there's not a lot of nightly rentals.
Right. So Cape Coral is a monthly rental, but they are not real strict with it. So we have had all monthly. Besides this summer, we have a couple weekly, and our realtor is real strict about it. He says that as long as they're not getting upset with us, we'll do it. That they have rentals too, so they know the market real well. That's another thing that you have to really watch. But like I said, we knew that going in. And another thing, and some people do this to make income too, right? So you have to budget your income if you're going to live off of that. We're not doing that. This is investment. we get it paid off. Something happens to me. We're old parents. I didn't have a Logan until I was 37. This
Yeah.
is something that happens to us. That's hers. She'll have, 3 houses actually, but,
Yeah.
so that was the main plan too. It wasn't that we were expecting to make money on it so I could quit my job. Even
Yeah.
though I would like to retire, but right now we're just too busy to you can't walk away with stuff, with the markets the way they are, because it's just too lucrative for that.
Right.
So a little different. Some people try to get into to make a monthly income so they can, leave their job.
So I'm gonna ask you maybe a hard question, maybe not, and I'm gonna set you up a little bit. So why? And I'm gonna answer it as well. This is a question I get all the time, and you kind of answered it right there. But why would you ever buy an investment that you're not making monthly income on? And I just kind of want you to reiterate that, because I think that I do all the time, just so you know, and I'll help you with the answer as well on why I do it. But it's a question that people always say. Well, I always say cash flow is not the most important thing a lot of times on property ownership. There's a lot of long-term benefits of owning these properties when they're paying off by somebody else. But tell me why why would you make that decision to buy a property that may not be cash flowing right when you're buying it?
Well, just simply like what we said, it wasn't something that I was going to quit my job and I needed that money to pay our bills here. So we looked at it. We do want to make money. However, I think it's going to be down. We'll have a full marketing year. We'll take a look at it at that time. But if we don't, if we can come whole, that's our main thing. And then paying off down the debt and get it paid off. That's our key. And then when you rent, then you're going to have that income. And that's something that we could look, giving Logan a little bonus at the end of the year. I don't foresee us needing it, but let's say we start making money and at the end of the year, there's $5,000 extra in the kitty. And we say, here, Logan, you and Braden, they're not married yet, but they've been together since 7th grade. So we're thinking that they're probably eventually going to, and he actually runs our food truck. So he's kind of invested in our family anyways, but so that was something to give them a bonus. They could go, they love to go to Florida. They've been on many trips with us to St. John. We love St. John. So, they could go on a trip or something. So that's what we're looking for. And that was the game plan. And Logan's not looking for a check this year to go spend any money. And but down the road, it'd be great, to have go down on vacation wherever you want, or even go down and visit our location. So.
Right. And so, and this is, it's exactly why, right? It's thinking about that long-term plan, right? What does the far future look like? 3, 5, 10, 20 years from now, right? 10 years from now, Logan's going to be 31 years old and have 3 properties that are probably, at that time, they're most likely paid off, right? And so maybe you didn't make a dime cash flow the whole time and you just parlayed that into, you were able to enjoy these properties, but those are because the decisions you made to buy break-even properties right now, right? It's crazy. I speak at conferences all the time. I'm in rooms and I'll have 1,000 people in the room and I'll say, hey, what would you, if I set this property up and somebody else is paying for it and you didn't make a dime on it for the next 10 years, but you owned this property that somebody else paid for, would you take it? Everybody raises their hand and said, yeah, absolutely. No brainer, right? I would do that all day long. However, every day I talk to people who are like, I'm not buying that property because it's only giving me a 3% or 5% or 8% cash on cash return as far as cash flow. And I always challenge them that that short-sighted thinking is costing them millions of dollars on the back end in that 5, 10, 20-year time horizon. Because what happens is they don't buy really good quality assets in quality areas. They're going to appreciate, somebody else is going to pay for, and eventually they're going to be paid off. And now you've got this significant cash flow, but this huge net worth down the line, right? And so, I love the longer term thinking. And sometimes I think the older we get, the easier it is to make some of those decisions to say, hey, listen, 10 years is a blink of an eye, right? The older we get, we realize that 5, 10 years is not that long. When we're young, we think 5 years is an eternity. We're like, or we hate our job so bad that we want to immediately replace it. Well, that's not how investing works. I was just talking to one of my, a family member actually, and he said, hey, Sean, I want to sit down with you. We had a party over at our house and we've got, we've been blessed to have very nice, houses and things that we can do. And we have this pool party and we're sitting out by the horses and doing all of our stuff. And somebody's like, hey, I want to do what you do. Show me how to invest. And I said, I don't have this because I invest all the time, right? I have this because I learned a long time ago to work really hard, maximize my active income, and put it into stuff that ultimately 5, 10 years from now turns into something worth having, right? And worth bragging about. And there's a lot of properties that I buy that are not the home runs that a lot of our members have. Like I have properties that, I buy all the time that, and we have members that have properties that are way more cash flow and way better properties and way better situations than mine. But I like to buy certain properties in certain areas because I want to look back in 10 years and say, I'm glad I made that decision 10 years ago to buy this piece of ground or to buy this property, even though at the time, maybe it was a stretch to do it. Maybe it didn't make any money. And ultimately, after that, that time horizon has passed, and I look back, I say, man, I'm really glad I did that because now I have this stuff. And
Right.
and I was trying to explain that concept to him because he's in such a rush to replace his income. And I said, why don't you be in a rush to maximize your income and really take that income and buckle down for 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 years and get after it. He's really young. And I'm like, what you have today is based on the decisions you made 10 years ago or 5 years ago. Right. And so when you make those decisions, and I'm getting a little long-winded on this, I probably shouldn't, but I love that when we talk to investors that make that decision, that it's not all about the cash flow in the beginning, but that ultimately it's because I want Logan to have multiple properties that she's going to own and she's going to have, and ultimately they're going to produce some really nice cash flow when they're paid off. But you've also got this net worth of these properties that can act like, you can be your own bank because you can borrow against them. You can use that money for other stuff to parlay it into other investments, to your own home, whatever it is. But there's a lot of benefits on the back end by building and buying properties in quality areas and quality assets.
Yep, I agree. Yep.
Yeah. And so, so you said that this is number one. Number two is, you guys are thinking maybe going out west, maybe up to northern Michigan. I know that number two is already kind of in the works, right? You guys are building your own home, and then you're going to turn your current home into a short-term rental, correct?
Yep. Yep, that's the plan so far. I don't know about my neighbors loving the idea, but I think we're really going to make it priced out. We want it family. It's 5 bedrooms here. It's really, I've talked to a lot of the wedding planners in this area, and they're dying for stuff like this. So,
Yeah.
and we have no restrictions. There is, because we're on the lake area, there is a lot of rentals in the area, but they're small, usually 2-bedroom.
Right.
And they're seasonal, and they're older cottages. They haven't really updated them, even though they're kind of cute. Because I looked at buying a couple, and we decided not to.
Mm-hmm.
We thought that the age of the homes would be something that would be just something that we're working on constantly. This home here that we have, we just actually renovated the whole deck and system down to the water, and it was like $50,000 investment, but it was well worth it. It's so, we're gonna have a kids room, and we're really set up here for that kind of a family oriented, coming in for a wedding or any kind of event. And there's a lot of stuff that goes on between here and Detroit. We're in between, we're only 40 minutes from Detroit, so people could actually stay here and go to any events. There's casinos here. We have waterfront downtown. So we have the Mud Hens, if everyone's always heard of the Mud Hens, if you've ever watched MASH in your days.
Yeah.
So we got a lot here. We got Cedar Point, which is about 45 minutes from here, which is huge. And I've looked at over there in that area to do a rental. So we're kind of tossed up, but right now we're holding off not because we don't want to do anymore, but just because we got the house build and some other things going on.
Right. Well, the house build, and like you said, you're maximizing the season that you're in your active business, and you're active, with the, you got a lot going on there, I know. And so then you can parlay that into the next steps. Right. And so, it's really, everybody's journey, I always say, has so many lessons. And one of the key takeaways for me today is the decision to, one, do this as a family and say, hey, listen, Logan, I want you to be a part of this, right? You got some of this money sitting there. We're going to do this together. She's getting actively involved. I love when kids get actively involved in it, especially the younger they are, the more they can latch onto this concept of doing something and building something for the long term. Imagine if we were buying properties when we were 21 years old and holding them for the long term and looking back in our 30s, and saying, holy crap, I'm in a pretty good position at this stage. Right. And learning those skill sets. I'm trying to teach my kids the same thing. They just turned 13, so they're a little bit younger, but they're actively looking at a property. They've saved up about $25,000. I told my partner 50-50 with them. So they're getting close to be able to put 50% of the down payment down. Right. And so, but I'm making them go through that process and be active. And then the next one is saying it's okay to buy break-even properties. It's okay to buy in areas that your property is getting paid for by somebody else. And because long term, that's going to turn into a phenomenal investment, and your return on that investment long term is going to be really, really great. And so I think that's something that I want to always put an exclamation point on, because I'm always shocked at how few people will actually make that decision for the long term. They want that short term gain, and I always say, cash flow is not the most important thing, and that cash on cash return, in my opinion, is not always the most important thing to chase. And it's okay to have a break-even property, because those break-even properties can be really great investments. And so, Terri, at the end of every episode, I always put you on the spot and say, looking back and over the years of doing things, and you've navigated the entrepreneurial road and all these different things. So it could even be a lesson from there. But I always love you to share a lesson. If you could go back to your younger self and say, man, I wish I would have done this sooner, or this is something that I'm glad I did. What would you share with the listeners to say, hey, listen, if I could give you a piece of advice, this is what it would be?
Yeah, I think number one is joining a club like Odyssey helps, because you don't run into walls. That was the number one decision. But looking back, making this, would I've done it sooner? I had a lot of other businesses, and I would say this would be probably more profitable. Not that I wasn't profitable in the other businesses. There was a lot more risk, I feel, because you were more dependent on client flow and so forth. Yeah. I was in the restaurant business. I was in a workout, which, so I guess the biggest thing would be that sitting down, it didn't take us long. It took us about 1 week to look and taking this money that we had and reinvesting it into a property that Logan could be involved with, instead of sitting there. And that, it was an account that her dad had left her, and I didn't have a lot of control over. Besides, I could add to it and grow it, but I had limits. And so we asked our financial guy if she could actually get involved in this. And so that's when we made the decision. But looking back, growing up, my dad had rentals, and it was a pain. I mean, we were going to clean these rentals all the time, and people moving in and out, and then they destroy your property and so forth. So I definitely did not want to get into that long-term type, because we lived it through when they had rentals. So it was kind of a no-brainer when I started looking into, fumbled on to Odyssey and started reading that, this is the right thing to do.
Yeah. Awesome.
I was hoping you were going to ask me about we've only had one bad renter, and I think
let's hear. Yeah, I always love to hear the horror stories, and they are kind of the minority, but it's always good to hear about the ones that are the party throwers or something like that, right?
You and Dave called us on it because we were like in a panic, but we've had excellent renters, by the way. Our property manager says they leave the house cleaner than our cleaners clean it, they say. So we've had awesome reviews, and like I said, it's only been in rent for 6 months, let's say. So we've only had 4 or 5, not probably 6 renters. We had a renter come in, and she's a real estate agent, by the way, came in, and she didn't like the area. She liked the house. She didn't really say anything bad about the house. Besides, she said the oven caught on fire. Well, we checked into this, and she decided to roast a prime rib without a pan. She just had it on the shelf with nothing underneath it, and obviously it caught on fire. Not on fire, but it smoked up the house and so forth. And so she said she wanted all her money back. That's when we called you guys, and we actually were patient. We said, let's try to see if we can rent it out. If we can't, we'll talk again. And so we were scared that she would bash us. So actually she emailed our property manager after the time period where she would have had, and we said we did not get a chance to rent it. So we negotiated a price, and she was very happy with it and walked away, and she didn't ever write any bad reviews or anything like that. So it was kind of a funny thing. We look back at now and say, I can't believe the lady would roast a prime rib
with no
Number one, we
pan
got
and all the drippings hitting the heating element, it's going to smoke and it's going to be a problem, right? I remember. Now that I forgot about that when we started the conversation. I remember that when that happened. Now those emails going back and forth, like, what do you do here? Like, how do we handle this?
Do you give them
And
100% back? And we did not. We just said, let's be fair. There's nothing wrong. Our place is totally immaculate inside,
yeah,
and so forth. And so, but anyways, that was but we got through it, and we're
yeah.
still standing.
That's better than a squatter that's not paying and sitting in your house forever. And like, so it's funny. Some of the kind of the bad guests or the bad experiences and that we have as short-term rental hosts, they end up turning into fairly funny stories, right? I mean, and because they are few and far between, first of all, but it's the raging party that was thrown and the mattresses are up against the wall. I had that in our property
I remember.
in Terri Lynn. Remember I told you about that one? And I mean, it looked like it was a scene from The Hangover, the movie. And I'm like, but at the end of the day, it was like an extra $400 to clean it up, right? And the guests paid it. They were apologetic. They knew that they knew that they shouldn't have done that, right? And they knew in fact, they actually offered to pay for way more than it cost us to deal with it. But at the time, the cleaner was like, "Oh my gosh, you got to see your property. It's like tore apart, right?" And it did look really bad. She sent me pictures. I'm like, "Oh geez." But at the end of the day, we put it back together. And now it's a good story. And the guest actually left us a 5-star review on that one. Crazily, I mean, and I didn't leave them a 5-star review, but I was like, I appreciated their 5-star review, and the way they handled it, I will say was at least like they said, "Hey, we screwed up. We had a little too much to drink and a little too much fun, and so we apologize. We'll pay for what it's going to take." So.
Yeah, very
awesome.
little family down in Cape Coral. Usually it's couples and they're retired or close to being retired. So we're very fortunate. And that's one reason why we did pick that area too. So
yeah. It's a good area. It's always going to be a good area, right? I mean, it's a quality area, quality property. Again, long-term, that's what we look for. And so I'm excited to see this grow for Logan, for you guys, as you guys to put it together. You start coming out west, we'll take you on a tour out here. We'll make Chris happy, right?
Yeah.
So awesome, Terri. Well, listen, I appreciate you joining us. I appreciate your time. You guys that are listening, we know how valuable your time is, and we always appreciate you spending it with us as well. And so at the end of every episode, I ask you 2 favors. The first one is, if you enjoyed this show, we don't run ads, we don't do any sponsorships, we don't want people telling us what we can and can't say. And so it's just us. And so if you know somebody that likes these conversations, share the show. So when it grows, those things do help us. If you have more than 30 seconds, like it, leave us a review on whatever platform you're watching or listening on. And the most important thing that I ask you to do at the end of every episode is pick that one thing you can do today, start building that life you don't want to take a vacation from. Cheers, my friends.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Vacation Rental Revolution podcast. Share this with other people you think need to hear about it. And don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. Hey Grace, is there a website?
Yes! For more amazing content and expert advice, visit Vodacy.com.
Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.